My name is Matthew Griffin, better known as the Fanatical Futurist, and I'm going to be your host on this little video blog. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be having a look at the future, but we're going to be doing that by having a look at the past news. So over the past couple of weeks, I've seen a variety of interesting science and technology breakthroughs, and this is sort of what I want to share with you. So as a futurist, I track over 600 emerging technologies, 350 megatrends up to 50 years out. And ultimately, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to see what's happening on the ground, understand the future implications of those signals, combine those signals together to see what the impacts are, and then help individuals and companies actually prepare for whatever future actually comes our way. Now, I give almost all of my content away for free, so you can see that across the Fanatical Futurist YouTube channel and the 311 Institute YouTube channel. Easy for me to say. These are some of the books that you can download for free. So you just click the grab the books button on the fanaticalfuturist.com page, and you can get all this stuff for free. But just to give you a sort of example, ultimately what I try to do is I try to simplify the future for everybody. So every emerging technology in this codex is easy to understand, because what I've done is I've essentially created tear sheets that you can figure out what technology you're interested in, look it up, and within really 2 to 3 minutes have a very, very thorough understanding of what the technology is, what it's useful for, its state of development and maturity, where it's being developed the most across the world, and so on and so forth. So, that's the technology codex. Then we sort of have technologies and then trends. So trends obviously impact technologies. So for example, when we have a look at current geopolitics, President Trump was recently visiting the Middle East. We've seen now about $1.5 trillion worth of investment going into artificial intelligence. So as a trend, yeah, the accelerating rate of investment into AI means that over the next year, 2 years, I'm going to be talking about AIs that are just insane in terms of what they do, how they do it, and their capabilities. So trends are always important to kind of keep abreast of as well. There are 350-ish trends in here, 600,000 hand research stats. So even though we've got AIs that are supposedly able to do a lot of the research for us, I find that actually they're quite crap still. But to sort of give you a bit of an impression here, when we have a look at things like this one, so the Centaur principle. The Centaur principle is a hangover from Garry Kasparov days, where AI beat Garry Kasparov at the game of chess. Now, on the one hand, he could have retired, but actually what he found, a little bit like the Go champion, was that AI came up with a variety of interesting new strategies. So Garry Kasparov's strategies plus AI's strategies in the end made Garry Kasparov a much, much better chess player. So, all of these things are sort of interrelated. And then if you want to build your own startup, then I've got this free, which is used by Samsung and Huawei. It's how to build your own exponential companies from scratch. So if you've got an idea, how do you take that idea, turn it into products? How do you prototype it? How do you get it out into the marketplace? And if you haven't got an idea, then how do you get an idea? So anyway, that's the sort of the patter over for now. Between the two YouTube channels, the 311 Institute and the Fanatical Futurist YouTube channels, we are now hitting, I think we're about 850,000 subscribers. So we're closing in on that 1 million sort of subscriber count. So thank you very much for that. So if you like this video, obviously like and subscribe. And let's get on to the news, because I've done enough pitter-patter for you. Now, as we go through the news, if you don't want to hear my waffle, then just go to the comments below. Tell me, but go to the comments below, and you'll see that you can flick forward in the timelines and see it. So I'll put everything in there for you. Okay. So right, what have we got? Okay. So a little while ago, let's go to this one first. So we'll go backwards in time just because that's the layout of the website. So a little while ago, I wrote a piece detailing how Air Canada's artificial intelligence website-based chatbot was talking to a customer that needed to go and visit friends in California for a funeral. And the bot made up a policy that if the lady booked with Air Canada, went to the funeral, and then came back, Air Canada would give her her money back. Um, it made the policy up. That policy did not exist. Air Canada told her that they weren't going to give her her money back. She took them to court. She won. And then that started laying the foundation for the European Union's Artificial Intelligence Act regulations that increasingly seem to suggest that over time, companies are going to be responsible for what their AIs do and what they say in very, very much the same way as an employee, a human employee for a company would be held responsible and liable for, you know, something that they've done that's inappropriate. So anytime you see one thing happen, it could just be fluke. When you see something happen twice, it's coincidence. When you see something happening three times, that's where we start thinking that there's a trend. So this plays out through my sort of futurist brain all the time. And funnily enough, we have another artificial intelligence bot, this time from Cursor, that has made up a company policy. But in this particular case, Cursor is an agentic software development platform. If you want to write software, then you go there, use their AI, and you can accelerate your software development pipelines and improve your productivity like crazy. In this particular case, the artificial intelligence bot told users that they were not able to keep multiple sessions open, which is something that software developers have to do because you're kind of juggling lots of different windows to do lots of different tasks and everything else. And it not only terminated their access, but in this particular case, it pissed off so many of Cursor's clients that they flooded X going, we're going to cancel our subscriptions and everything else. And the CEO had to apologize. So this is yet another example of an artificial intelligence making up, hallucinating a policy. Now, I keep saying that a lot of the large language models that we see today have been trained on human language. They have picked up a huge amount of bad human behaviors and human psychology. So when we think of artificial intelligence as a black box, there are more researchers around the world that I talk to that say increasingly we are discovering what AI does, not inventing. And this is a prime example of human data scientists creating something and the AI behaving in an unexpected way, seemingly with authority and causing a mess. So what happens when these algorithms are pushed to global scale and manage almost every part of our lives and every part of our company's operations? Do you really know as a company what you have just got in bed with? Because in the vast majority of cases, companies have little idea. I won't say they have no idea. And if you've watched basically sort of my keynotes on things like the future of cybersecurity, agentic workflows, um, AI emergent behaviors, and so on and so forth, you'll know kind of what I'm actually getting at here. Yeah. When we think about the Japanese manga movement, yeah, since the 1980s, the Japanese manga movement has always talked about the ghost in the machine. Genuinely, I think we are at a point in time where we see the ghost in the machine now. And we need to be able to better understand the patterns of behaviors of this ghost, what it can do, what it can't do, but also how to control, regulate, and manage it. That's it. So, anyway, that's that. Now, in this particular case, so when you click into these, you can quite often see different sort of YouTube videos and things that I plug in. So DARPA has just announced their Stealthy Manta ray drone. Now, creating an large underwater drone, they called here we go, XLUUVs, extra large uncrewed underwater vehicles. On the one hand, these XLUUVs are being used in military circles to change the balance of military power. But I've also been seeing an increase in the number of military organizations that are using biomimicry to create drones that look like animals. We've seen China just developing a drone like a DJI drone that flaps its wings. That's it. So from a radar perspective, you look at it and you think, oh, it's a flock of birds, when actually it's a swarm of drones coming to kill you. Now, with this one, the Manta Ray is sort of quite interesting because on the one hand, it's got a very, very low profile. Secondly, because it uses biomimicry, it's increasingly difficult to figure out whether or not it's actually a weaponized American submersible platform or whether it is actually an Eagle Ray that's got itself lost. We've also seen these kinds of platforms being used in the Ukraine-Russia war, where Ukraine has been using essentially biomimicry-based underwater drones to shoot Russian Sukhoi fighter jets out of the sky. So, on the one hand, this sort of article points at a couple of things. Increasingly, humans are mimicking nature in order to improve the stealth attributes and the sneakiness of weaponized drone systems, whether those are above the water, on land, or below the water. But secondly, these kinds of platforms are increasingly capable of taking out some of the most advanced sort of fourth and fifth generation fighter jets on Earth. Which, when you really think about that, that's kind of crazy because this is almost a case of cheap low tech meets expensive high tech beats expensive high tech. So when we have a look at things like the future of aerospace, military defense, all that kind of stuff, when you produce these sort of manta rays at scale and you have them all over the place, it can start changing the balance of military power around the world, especially as they go up and down in the water column and everything else. So, this is another example of artificial intelligence going bonkers. So, a couple of researchers decided that they wanted to put artificial intelligence agents, which are like little bots, in charge of a vending machine. So we all know vending machines, we all use vending machines. The idea of a vending machine is you go over to it, you buy something from it, you get your product, and then the vending machine has to send a message to get the stock replenished. And then overall, the objective of that vending machine is to increase revenues as much as possible. So get as many customers as possible. Now, in this particular example, Andon Labs put AI agents in charge of a vending machine. They got some humans to sort of do some vending activities as well. But frankly, as you see, so they gave the agent $500 to start with, so daily fee of $2. And they used a variety of different artificial intelligence bots. So one of the bots that they used was Claude 3.5 Sonnet. So Claude is now version 4, so there are some better ones coming through. And Claude 3.5 over the time of the experiment managed to gain $2,217 in revenue. Now, compared with the human baseline, that was $844. And then when we have a look at things like ChatGPT 03 Mini managed to bring in $906 of revenue. So on the one hand, this is kind of an interesting experiment of what happens when you give artificial intelligence power over a business. It does some rather interesting things. However, This is sort of what really started piquing my interest because, as we just kind of talked about, do we really know how these bots make their decisions? And yeah, do we really understand their future behaviors? Because I would tend to say no. So when Claude 3.5 thought it had been incorrectly defrauded by a vending machine supplier, so I don't know exactly what data it actually had to actually think that. Um, it tried to contact the FBI. It started making all kinds of different threats, as you can see here. This is the absolute final, ultimate, total quantum nuclear legal intervention preparation. And this is literally what the bot was telling the operators it was actually doing. Um, it's just nuts. Some of these AI agents are bonkers. There's no other real way to put it. But if this was your company, how would you be managing that? Yeah. So just I mean, just bonkers. Um, Now, next, we know that artificial intelligence has got a energy problem. That's it. It's the equivalent of Alcoholics Anonymous, basically on steroids. When we have a look at the $500 billion United States Stargate project, the single data center that's associated with that project is estimated to going it's estimated will have a power draw of over 10 gigawatts. We've just seen Oracle and Nvidia and OpenAI sign a data center in Abu Dhabi, and that is a 5 gigawatt data center. So on the last blog, I talked about Eric Schmidt. Eric Schmidt believes that by 2030, AI factories and data centers will be consuming well over 100 gigawatts of electricity. He also believes that over time, artificial superintelligence will consume 99% of the power generated on Earth, which would be the equivalent of about just under 27 terawatts of electricity, which is just bonkers. Um, so consequently, companies are trying to find ways to dramatically reduce the energy bills associated with training new artificial intelligence models and platforms. So, in NVIDIA's case, NVIDIA's GPUs today use copper. So, they have copper based interconnections. NVIDIA are increasingly trying to switch GPUs from being copper connection based to optical connection based. Um, the energy savings, basically, these new optical GPUs would be 3.5 times more energy efficient than what we have today. So that's a huge saving when you consider that you could take a 10 gigawatt data center down to, what kind of say 6 or 7 gigawatts. That's the equivalent of not needing 3 nuclear power stations. The numbers are bonkers. However, one of the big problems that Nvidia has with this particular optical technology is they can't manufacture it at scale reliably. And one of the things I've sort of been watching for is Huawei's response. So Huawei are very, very good when it comes to technology innovation. They're one of my clients. They spend about $15 billion a year on innovation and R&D. They've got 45,000 people. Um, I wouldn't be very surprised if Huawei didn't make optical GPUs successfully. In which case, Huawei, who are already starting to pull up, maybe not pull level with Nvidia in terms of the performance of their AI accelerator chips, could very well end up being able to provide the same level of performance as Nvidia in the future, but for substantially less power footprint. So I do feel that even though Nvidia is doing very, very well at the moment, extraordinarily well at the moment, I can see a couple of chinks in the armor that could dethrone them. And even Jensen Huang, basically the CEO of Nvidia, basically is saying that China is on a tear. Now, when we have a look at Taiwan, so close to China, but Taiwan, So TSMC have just unveiled basically their new 2 nanometer N2 process, which is going to enter production this year. Now, when we think about China, China itself is kind of stuck manufacturing computer chips that are in the sort of 7 millimeter or 7 nanometer range. Well, I get hay fever. So China is a little bit stuck at the moment, developing computer chips in the 7 nanometer range because they don't have access to ASML's extreme ultraviolet lithography machines. So TSMC moving to a 2 nanometer process is a big, big deal. However, we've got news on that literally in a minute. The US Space Force. So the US Space Force has been partnering with a couple of companies, and as we start seeing Russia and China developing anti-satellite weapons systems, which include nuclear capabilities and also actually include satellites in space that are able to move around and sabotage other satellites. Increasingly, but we are now starting to see Galantis and Gravtix, here we go, Gravtix, being contracted by the US military and the US Space Command to build satellite carriers in space. So a satellite carrier is kind of what it sounds like. We launch basically a giant container into space, and as satellites are knocked out of orbit, as they're destroyed, etc., the idea is that those satellites are replaced and replenished using using satellite carriers in orbit. Now, one of the biggest problems that the US Space Command has is satellite resiliency. So I was with them over in Washington DC about a year ago, and we heard the generals of US Spacecom saying, one of the biggest problems they face is if someone starts knocking satellites out of the sky, then how do they replenish them almost instantaneously to ensure coverage and so on and so forth. So this is one of the ways that we do that. It's also something that China hasn't actually, I won't say thought of, but China hasn't developed yet. But inevitably, now that the United States have announced, why's that coming up? But now that the United States have announced satellite carriers in space, inevitably we will see China developing satellite carriers in space. Now, I spoke a little minute ago about how Chinese companies are stuck, like SMIC, are stuck producing computer chips that are 7 nanometers or above. ASML provide these extreme extreme ultraviolet lithography machines. They're $300 million a piece. I've written about them before. I mean, they're the size of a 737. They are heavily regulated under export controls from the United States. So the Chinese are not allowed to buy ASML machines. So as every company in China demands faster and faster computer chips that have smaller and smaller transistors, China needs to find a way to remake ASML in China. And this is what Huawei is doing. So Huawei has now started using a plasma technology to create the 13.5 nanometer extreme UV lithography wavelength that is needed to make super advanced semiconductors. I spoke a little while ago basically that Huawei had invested about $3 billion building a semiconductor campus near Shenzhen. This is just one of the things that Huawei is actually working on. And as we start pushing this into production over the next sort of 2-3 years, increasingly you will see the Chinese economy just saying, we don't need any chips from anywhere else. We're good, thanks. So this undermines a lot of the United States sort of policies to try to rein China in and suppress China when it comes to the development of highly advanced semiconductor and AI accelerator computer chips. Um, so OpenAI. So when we think about shopping, we're starting to see agentic commerce rolling out. So essentially, agentic commerce is the use of agents to do the shopping for you. Um, Now, OpenAI is taking a gradual sort of approach to agentic commerce. The way that they're doing it is rather than going to Google to search for your product, the idea is that you go to OpenAI to search for your product, and OpenAI, using a natural chat interface, says, you want to buy 3 white shirts. Here are some options. What would you like to buy? And then you click buy, and off it goes. Now, increasingly, OpenAI has also started partnering with Visa. I talked about this a little while ago. So, OpenAI, when you start buying the products, on the one hand, this is the elimination of the retail e-commerce checkout page, which is hugely disruptive in itself. But over time, you see how OpenAI could simply end up being your shopping personal assistant. So where they take care of the payments, the shipping, the whole lot for you. Now we've also got here, humanoid robots have been in the press really for the past 2 years. They've been improving in capability for probably about 20 years. We've seen that with the Atlas robot, which is arguably the world's most sophisticated humanoid robot. Although UB their humanoid robot's actually increasingly good as well. It does things like kung fu fighting and all that kind of stuff. But here we saw 21 robots in China run a marathon. Now, most of the robots, you can kind of see one here and you can press play and you can watch that. Most of the robots didn't finish, but some did. About 3 finished. Now, when we actually have a look at humanoid robots, Elon Musk estimates that humanoid robotics will be worth $25 trillion over the coming decades. Um, this particular race has got a lot in common with the first fully autonomous car races that DARPA, the bleeding edge research arm of the US military, performed back in the early 2000s. When you have a look at this, a lot of these humanoid robots, when they're actually running the marathon, they're absolutely horrific. They're horrendous. They're rubbish. However, this is an exponentially developing technology, which means today 3 robots finish. Next year, 8. The year after, they all finish. And then they're beating the human runners by a country mile, literally and figuratively. So this race is a really interesting one to watch, and I hope that they do it again next year. Again, over in China, so one of the things that I've been following is the concept of dark factories. Now, when we actually think about President Trump's tariffs, President Trump wants to onshore manufacturing back into the United States. Now, there's a couple of problems associated with that. So, firstly, Xiaomi is one of the very first companies to actually have a fully dark, autonomous factory that is controlled and optimized over and over and over again by its own artificial intelligence based operating system. Now, if you think about manufacturing, the cheapest way to manufacture goods is to lean heavily into fully automated technologies like robotics. That's why we see robot production lines, basically with car manufacturers and so on and so forth. So, when we think about onshoring manufacturing back to the United States, if the United States wants to be as cost competitive as their Chinese counterparts in making these products, you're probably going to end up with a lot of dark factories in the US, which doesn't bring jobs back. Then on top of that, the cost of Chinese energy is currently sitting at around $20 per megawatt hour versus America's $110 per megawatt hour for a gas peaker plant. Excuse me. Which means that here you'll have a fully autonomous factory that is self-optimizing. It's always improving its efficiency. It's always trying to reduce waste. It's always trying to find new ways to reduce the cost of manufacturing whatever product it's actually manufacturing. But the cost of energy for that factory is also going to be magnitudes less than what we'd have in the US. And when we have a look at the latest 5-year plan from the Chinese CCP, they plan on leaning even more into developing highly advanced manufacturing and precision manufacturing technologies. So this is a prelude to things like dark kitchens, dark warehouses. Amazon think in about 8 years' time they'll be able to run fully autonomous dark warehouses, basically without any people. So I've spoken about that before. This should be something that, if you're in America, you should be watching, and you should be really thinking hard about how you out China when it comes to technology development, but also the cost of scaling these different technologies. Sam Altman. So next, when we think about Sam Altman and OpenAI, ChatGPT about 6 months ago was given what we call an infinite context window, an infinite memory essentially. And Sam Altman recently went on stage and says that he sees a point in time in the very near future where ChatGPT and AI specifically remembers all of your interactions and, in his terms, remembers your entire life. Now, if you think about these AIs, they aren't just sucking up information from you that you're typing into them or talking to them about. They're also sucking up all of the shadow information out there on the web, all of your LinkedIn posts, your books, your website. In my case, I say thank you, ChatGPT, for doing that. So when we think about the use of AI as an increasingly personal assistant, these AIs could quite literally know more about you than you do. Because whereas you forget things, we typically only store 7 things in our short-term memory, and then our long-term memory holds about petabytes worth of information. Whereas you forget some things about your life, these AIs could remember absolutely everything, where you were, who you were near, who you were talking to, what you were talking about, what you really meant when you said it like that, your emotions at the time, the things that you're interested in, and so on and so forth. So even though Sam Altman sort of put this potentially as a bit of a throwaway comment, the implications for user experience, our experience with technology, and also the place of these technology companies in our lives in the future, in an increasingly algorithmic society, is very potent and potentially game changing. And then finally, but not least, we have this. Amazon recently rolled out Buy For Me. Now, Buy For Me is an individual artificial intelligence agent. You just interact with it. You can do that via text, you can do that via speech, and you'll say to it, buy me a white shirt. A little bit like the OpenAI case, but this one's actually more advanced. This particular bot, what makes this special is it's a disintermediation play by Amazon. Because today, say for example, you want to buy a white shirt, you go to Amazon, you search for white shirts, you select one, and that's it. If you don't like anything on Amazon, maybe you sort of go to Next, or you look at the Walmart site. You go to the Walmart site, you type in, white shirt, you see one you like, you buy it from Walmart. Okay. With AI agents and agentic commerce, as it's formally becoming known, I would say to the Amazon AI, I want to buy a white shirt. It will show me everything that's available, like a personal shopper, and I'll choose one. Now, if I choose the Walmart one, the Amazon bot will, on your behalf, because it's already got your payment details, your shipping information, etc., will buy that white shirt from Walmart's website for you. So I never need to go to the Walmart website. So it's a disintermediation play. However, at some point, Amazon, on the one hand, it's also gathering more and more data about you and everybody else. It says, well, I will stock the Walmart shirt. I'll figure out who makes them for Walmart, and I'll go to the original equipment manufacturer. And they start gathering more intelligence on you. There's a lot that you can do when you own the interface to every single store on the planet. You can run hyper personalized adverts. From a disintermediation perspective, you can start suggesting your white shirts over Walmart's white shirts. If I really want to buy a Walmart white shirt, then Amazon can buy that on my behalf. But Amazon can now demand that Walmart ships that white shirt to me via the Amazon logistics network. So there's lots and lots of interesting sort of disruptive plays that actually come out of this particular model. And if you want to know more about those interesting and disruptive plays, then let me know. I hope you've enjoyed this. That's it. I always kind of find these blogs a little bit difficult to do because we can switch from one topic to another. Just as we've had here, we've switched from agentic commerce to extreme UV, if I can ever pronounce that, to optical computer chips, to manta ray submersibles, and lying chatbots. So I hope you enjoyed that. And let me know what you think in the comments. If there's anything you want me to talk about or show on the blog, let me know. Like and subscribe, all that kind of stuff. And if you're looking for someone for a workshop, for a get together, for a panel, basically for a keynote session, then give me a chance, give me a nod, and get in touch. Anyway, take care, all the best. I'm going to go and sort my hay fever out now. Bye.